Welcome back to the NFL Injury Report. I'm your host, Dr. Jon Snyder, and we are looking at moving into week 3 here. It hasn't gotten any better for the Jets, and eventually you may not see this mug here anymore. I don't know if there'd be just something else or just nothing entirely. Kind of like the Jets. But anyways, let's get into the rest of the league because that's more interesting. This was a really bad week for quarterbacks. The biggest headliner being Joe Burrow for the Cincinnati Bengals is now out a minimum of 3 months with a turf toe injury that requires surgery due to ligament damage. The video from week 1 talks about that plantar ligament on the bottom surface of that big toe. That's commonly that ligament that's involved, and usually that does require surgery. So Burrow's going to be out a minimum of 3 months. Hopefully the Bengals can hold on, keep it close, at least an even split over the next 12 games here, and then he can come back at the end and push for a playoff berth there. Jaden Daniels, quarterback for the Washington Commanders, suffered a knee sprain during that game against the Packers, and he is not going to be practicing at all until at least Friday. He did end up throwing Wednesday. He's focusing on the rehab rather than getting into practice and being a limited participant, but something to keep an eye on. And even if he does play from a fantasy perspective, you have to wonder, is he going to be able to move as well as he normally does, which is a huge piece of not only his game, but points for fantasy as well, especially in a PPR league where you're getting points either per run or those running yardage points. Brock Purdy, we know he was injured. He was obviously held out of that game against New Orleans this past week. Mac Jones, 3 touchdowns. What a guy. But there is a chance this week that Purdy plays. He's going to be continuously evaluated throughout this week, so it's still up in the air, but they did not shut him down immediately like they did last week coming into Sunday. What else we have? Justin Fields, got to come back to the Jets. It always comes back to the Jets. Left the game on Sunday, if you can call it a game, against the Bills with a concussion. Tyrod Taylor is expected to play. Fields was officially ruled out Wednesday afternoon, and Taylor will take the reins. Fields will continue to be in concussion protocol and is considered day-to-day, week-to-week. The final quarterback, I believe, is Minnesota's own J.J. McCarthy. He suffered a high ankle sprain and is expected to be out at least 2 to 4 weeks. High ankle sprains are tough just because there's so much weight and load that goes through that membrane between your tibia and fibula. It helps to share that weight that's put through it between the 2 bones, as well as offering an attachment site for a multitude of muscles. So those can usually take a little bit longer to heal. So hopefully it's a 2-week recovery. But it may be up to 4, possibly a little bit longer. From a wide receiver standpoint, I think this is one of only 2 on the list, which is a nice change for wide receivers from last week. Emeka Egbuka, the rookie standout for Tampa Bay, who is on yours truly's fantasy team, just throwing that out there. Suffered a hip and groin injury, looked like it was irritated or at least injured during the game prior to that epic comeback against the Texans. He had his leg wrapped during the game at one point and then continued to play. But it's unclear what it will mean for him Sunday against the Jets. If he is able to play, hopefully he can move the way that he normally would, because with a lot of attention from Sauce Gardner looking to be towards Mike Evans, Ibuka could have a really big day working against some of the Jets safeties or second cornerback Brandon Stevens there. Josh Jacobs, Packers running back, he was limited on Wednesday with an ankle sprain. He is considered day-to-day. He's played the past couple of weeks. I wouldn't expect him not to play, but something to keep an eye on at the very least. All right, and what else do we have? Oh, I think I'm getting a call. 1 second. Oh, it's my internal source. 1 second, please. Yeah. Really? No, I didn't know that. Oh, that's perfect. I'm doing the show right now. Yeah. Perfect. All right, I'll talk to you later. All right. Love you, Mom. Bye. Aaron Jones was just placed on IR with a hamstring strain, so it is short-term IR. He's going to miss a minimum of 4 weeks, similar to George Kittle last week. But expect Jordan Mason, that standout running back from San Francisco last year that took over for Christian McCaffrey. He actually played pretty well in McCaffrey's stead. He's going to take over the bulk of carries in Minnesota. They signed him this offseason. Minnesota also made a move to sign Cam Akers, who's bounced around the league a little bit, but they signed him to their practice squad to shore up some of that backfield depth. But Aaron Jones is on IR, so get out there, get on waivers, make sure you grab Jordan Mason because he could be a really big piece in your fantasy team moving forward. Now, our deep dive today is going to be looking into Xavier Worthy. Yes, he got injured in week 1. Yes, I know he didn't play last week, but the good news is that it's looking like he may be able to play this week. And he returned to practice in a limited role, which is a really positive sign and continues to suggest that arrow is trending upwards for him this week. Now, for Worthy, he suffered a labral tear injury, and allegedly it's a full tear, but you never really know. But regardless, the labrum, specifically for the shoulder, you have one in your hip as well. Your labrum is responsible for a couple of different things. One is it's responsible for deepening the socket of your shoulder so that that ball sits better in the socket and has more freedom to move. If you only had the bone there, your range of motion would be a lot more limited and it'd be more likely that you end up subluxing or dislocating your shoulder. The other thing that your labrum does is offers attachment site for a lot of muscles. One of them, which is the most common, is the long head of the biceps. That will attach onto that superior part of your labrum, and that's why a lot of times if there is a labral tear, it's often most commonly in that area, depending on the motion and the sport or the mechanism of injury. And so that's why there's usually some amount of bicep involvement. Depending on the severity of the injury, your treatment options are a little bit different. If there's just some fraying of the labrum, maybe they'll clean it out if you're having a lot of symptoms, but a lot of times you don't have symptoms with just fraying. Small tears are often treated non-surgically with physical therapy and some rehab, working on correcting your shoulder mechanics to take as much stress off the labrum, making sure that that shoulder is moving appropriately and putting stress in the right areas, as well as strengthening and stabilizing within those mechanics to make sure that you're in the strongest position possible. Now, if there's a large tear or symptoms persist, that's where surgery might be required. And for surgery, what they'll have to do is either they'll cut back and resect part of the labrum that is torn, or they will reattach it to the bone. If they end up reattaching it, you're most likely going to be in sling for a little while, and you're looking at somewhere around a 4+ month recovery. That process will be initially just keeping that shoulder immobilized, letting that labrum heal, and that graft heal to allow for the labrum to reattach to the bone, and then slowly working on improving range of motion and starting to then build strength, stability, and putting more stress through that labrum. Now, like I said, it's usually around a 4+ month recovery. Ultimately, it depends on what it is that the patient is getting back to. For a professional athlete, it's going to take a little bit longer because you have to ramp up to a higher and more significant volume and intensity of activity that you're trying to do. Another type of patient that might take a little bit longer of a recovery is someone who does a lot of overhead work, because you're constantly putting stress on that labrum for long periods of time, where it requires a lot of stability and strength to keep that arm up and do things with that arm and shoulder. So that is a little bit more detail about the injury to Xavier Worthy. And you finally got to hear me take a call from my inside source, so that's very exciting. For now, I have to keep the name under wraps, but so long as he keeps feeding me information, we'll be able to keep doing this little talk show. So, as always, let me know in the comments what you guys think, if there's anyone you want me to talk about, and make sure you like, and I'll see you in the next one.